Hi everyone, welcome to Third Coast Gaming Impressions. Today is September 21st. It is Tuesday. It is episode 44. We keep going. I'm joined by my co-host Austin Taylor. Hi there.
Yeah, you are. It's me, and I'm back from
He's
where I was
back.
before.
I haven't heard from him in a week. That's a lie. We played video games like
Yeah,
a day or
we
two
have we
ago.
haven't spoken in a week. I've been busy avenging the wrongs done to me by Johnny Ringo.
I don't know the reference, but we played State of Decay 2. That's a game. Who's Johnny Ringo? What's going on? Do I have to Google
That's
Johnny
a different
Ringo?
thing. That's a
Is that a
different. It's gonna
reference?
come up in later impressions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yep. I know what you're talking about. Can't wait to talk about. We're also going to talk about Call of Juarez Gunslinger, as well as me talking about Red Dead for another week,
Yeah.
and some boyfriend dungeon. Hopefully, that's what we're gonna go on in this show today. I'm starting a new section. It's called "What's in the Show," where I tell people what's in the show, so maybe they'll stick around. Um, State of Decay, State of Decay 2 is pretty cool. I'll let you run off from it because I think you've played a lot more, and as well as like the first game.
Yeah. So this is, State of Decay is developed by Undead Labs. That first game is released, I believe, in 2013 on like the Xbox Live Arcade sort of label, which is the 360 era sort of marketplace for what we would now call indie games, so and also some smaller games, developed by larger studios. Uh, which is in this sort of State of Decay is just a zombie apocalypse standard fare survival game that focuses on community building. The first game has like that one campaign where you're some fella named Marcus and you switch between like other community members as you assemble them and you're managing resources. And then they make this second game in like 2015 or 2016. I honestly can't remember the year.
I got the date. It's May
Ah,
22nd, 2018.
28. Damn, it's
Yeah, the
more
first
recent than I
game,
thought.
June 5th, 2013.
Hell yeah, I got that one right.
Oh, God, I'm watching this gameplay. The first game. This is
The first game's real rough.
I'm
Like,
into I'm into like its style.
yeah, like there's a reason why that first game, when I finally buy it in like 2015, I played that for most of my senior year of high school. I am continuously returning to that game, even though I have a PlayStation 4 and am putting a lot of time into the two expansions that came out with that because like it was a very rare thing. But that game, an Xbox 360 arcade game under that label, had two expansions, one of which was a sort of continuous adventure where the original campaign ends once you get to the ending. That campaign that you can get as DLC just continues as and resets the map as you sort of hit that end state. And then you have a third expansion that is you are the military, you are getting survivors out of a heavily infected city, and you are constantly doing high level horde missions where they all come
Okay.
to kill civilians as you're evacuating them. It's a fun
More
game.
like a survival like a wave based mode at
Yeah,
the end there. Just kind
yeah,
of messing with their like toolbox that they can like do stuff in.
yeah,
I will say like okay, my junior and senior year was like me playing Fallout for like 100
yeah,
hours, so I can definitely see this being like an endless open world where you're just coming home from school, you don't have a job and you're just doing this cuz it's senior year who just barely do your homework. I don't fuck it, dude.
yeah. I mean, thing is you don't really have to put much time into your homework if all your homework's very easy because you don't apply it yourself.
It's
Um,
true. Got to keep that C and B average going.
yeah. I, yeah,
I think
yeah,
I kept a B most of it. I don't know. Whatever. I took easy classes. I didn't take AP stuff.
yeah.
Besides
So,
that,
so State of Decay 2 comes out, and it's got a much bigger focus on like the procedural generation of its characters, right? So every character is randomized. They each have traits, and you'll start up a game with two or three characters. You have sort of standard templates like the lovers, the father-daughter kind of thing, the business partners, best friends, I believe, are examples. And you start out with these two randomly generated people, and then you go out into the world. You get a little tutorial on how to kill the zombies, use a gun, manage your sound levels because you're constantly emitting sound as you do certain actions that will attract zombies. Um, and then also base building, which is you find a big enough house or a warehouse or some other such structure, and you start installing little like working areas, barracks, workshops where you can make equipment such as gun equipment and the such. And it's that's really the game in the long run, right? State of Decay 2 also has like two other expansions, one of which I believe is a sort of redo of that first game's horde mode. The second one is a attempt at a real narrative campaign, which takes you back to the location of the first game and puts you in a higher difficulty environment where you face off against a new sort of plague threat, uh, just called the Plague Walls, which are just really big zombie spawners. Um, and that's sort of that. It's called the Heartland DLC. That DLC is the setup for the Homecoming DLC, which puts that first game's map into the main mode of State of Decay 2, which is its various campaigns. And that's what we played.
Oh, I thought we were on a different area. Don't know.
No, no, you brought us back into like the world that you made was Trumbull Valley, and that is the location of that first game. Ow, I hit my desk.
Interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah.
Apparently, I should have started on Meager Valley, according to Google. That's an okay map. Anyway, side note. That's a side note for another campaign I might start. Because I have been wanting just to do a little bit of this solo. I think the co-op we played was really fun. I have a thing in me where I want to throw this game on easy and just kind of like mess around in the open world.
Yeah.
And there are the options. I think there's like 4 difficulties to kind of ramp this up into how much you want to interact with the like diminishing like survival aspects, whereas like the world is taking away like your food resources to keep your base fed with like your multiple survivors in there and your gas supplies and your ammo supplies. And I think building like materials is like the other type of supplies, which are like you pick them up, they're big rucksacks you put on your back and you can store them into cars. But normally as a character you can only hold one, and then you can give one to each of your companions. So they're very heavy, but they are very useful. And then you can get more of those when you have your bigger base, and you can go claim smaller outposts that will generate those resources depending on what resources your base tends to need more of, which seems to be like we needed it seems like food is a big one, and then I can't tell which ones deplete faster.
So like the resources deplete based off of various modifiers. So food is definitely the big one that depletes because food, right? It's stored on like a scale of 1 to like you fill up without upgrading your storage to 25, right? So if you have 25 food resources for every character in your enclave or in your community, one of those food resources will be taken away daily. So in my campaign that I'm doing, I have 7 people in my enclave, so I'm losing 7 food per day. So I have 2 different outposts that are built around getting me food resources, and I'm also consistently going out to the world to look for more. And it's something I have to do just about every day in that game's in-game in an in-game day.
Yeah, and I will say I have very well enjoyed how like unique the like gameplay loop of this, where there's not a lot of zombie games or open world games that are like this. I mean, there are open world survival games that are similar that I can rattle off, but I really enjoy like the zombie survival setting. Like it's not as much of a survival game, but I like Dead Rising, and I like Last of Us, which is more of a solo single player like linear thing. And then I'm trying to think of the other one that's like, I think like not Daisy, what's that PlayStation 4 one where you're the motorcycle guy?
Days Gone.
I think about Days Gone too, because I have it for free, and I'm like, I could play this for like 10 hours and just kind of see what it's about and do the zombie thing. Because I think like the motorcycle stuff is really interesting in that. Whereas in this, like you have a base. This is like, I will call this the Walking Dead Simulator 2020, or those
Yeah,
type of games where you have like those early seasons of The Walking Dead is they have a base and they're going out for supply runs, and sometimes they meet some bad people who they get in arguments with, and then there's like a central protagonist every season,
yeah.
and you're
It's
kind of getting this in there. You have your base, you can park cars in it, you have all these characters who are very unique and have their traits and personalities, and you're switching between them because like a character will be fatigued and you have to switch to a new one, and they have certain missions that are bound to each type of characters, and I have very enjoyed that loop that's in this game.
yeah, like it's the second season of The Walking Dead in the form of a video game, which is like a pretty, I don't want to say like it's a novel enough angle, right? Because even looking at like these other games that we mentioned, like The Last of Us has no sort of community aspect to it outside of its some points in its narrative. Where Days Gone does actually have some community focus to it. It's never necessarily about building that community up in any way that isn't about it benefiting you directly, because you are a sort of central figure as Deacon St. John, like you are a set character. Whereas with Days Gone, because your priorities have been sort of expanded to just this community as a whole that you're building, not like any individual character living within that community, it's it's a lot more like interesting and I think deeper in how it wants to sort of look at the ways like how you build a community, like a relatively like positive and healthy community in this like horrendous situation. There's definitely it's definitely lacking in the ways that you deal with say people's like emotional needs. I would say like you can really fix that problem by making sure that there are enough beds and that you have a building like a lounge set up. But but it gets closer than I think any bigger sort of zombie game that I can think of in exploring this part of the apocalypse.
Yeah, and I think that works. I have only played the co-ops that we did. I think you've played more of the single player for two, but I think the co-op works to a degree, except that like only one person's world is the one that's making progression. You bring your characters over and you can level them up, but you're not doing anything for year one. I hope in three they have like a shared. It's like you're creating almost like a Minecraft server where
Yeah,
both of us are can do stuff in it. Like if you leave, I can do stuff while you're gone, or maybe there's an agreement between the two of us where we're only making progress when we both want to log in, some kind of stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah. And that's the thing, right? Because my understanding is when Days Gone 2 came out, I don't think Microsoft owned Undead Labs.
Yeah.
Um, and of course now they do. So hopefully, like being under the Xbox umbrella, they might get some more resources. And once they come out with that third game, there could be some really interesting stuff in it. Because that co-op sort of mode in this game, like I can make progress towards my own thing, right? Like when I access the supply locker and the in community members, it's all coming from my community, right? And I am actually affected in what I can do based off of like what you have in your community. For instance, when I was, in your world, I couldn't because you hadn't built a workshop building. I couldn't repair my weapons.
Huh.
Uh,
That's bad.
yeah, but the thing is when I go to the supply locker to, change those weapons out, I'm changing out from my supply locker, which includes like my high sort of in-game assault rifle that could carry like 51 bullets in it, um, and absolutely just unload on some fools. So there is these sort of disparate elements that kind of make the co-op in this game very a real mixed bag of an experience. Like it's very fun in the moment to moment in that we get into a location and we're both scavenging. I think that the fact that it denotes the containers I can actually search through and the ones you can search through as two different containers is kind of annoying. Like different container types by like color coding it is kind of annoying. Uh, but aside from that, just the most of it is fun enough. I just have to make sure that if I have a resource that you need, I put it down somewhere where you can get to it. And I just wish that wasn't necessarily something I needed to worry about as much. And that's why, like, yeah, as sort of a
Yeah.
shared world is my fantasy for that third game. That is something I want to see
Yeah, that'll be really
expanded on.
cool. I Many games have done like co-op resource looting differently. The closest one I can think of is like this is different, but it's like Ghost Recon Wildlands had if I pick up a mod for a weapon, you'll just pick it up too because we're
Yeah,
both looting this area, but it's all like preset unlocks in like a checklist. Whereas this is like, yeah, you're getting resources for food and all this other stuff. There's probably solutions. There's probably a chart of in my mind there is a whiteboard of how do we make co-op better with scribblings on do we do this decision, or this decision. And yeah, it's a bunch of different stuff. The color code looting's okay. I think it solves like one person's in an area and just loots everything there. But I think that kind of also, if you're playing with someone you trust,
yeah,
not just a random person you match made with,
yeah.
I think that your shared stuff is better. But I think the color coded looting probably works better with if I'm playing with strangers and
Yeah.
like they're not just taking all the resources
Well,
and
that's the idea,
stuff.
right? Like, it's very much a anti-griefing measure that does hinder the sort of experience between trusted players. Um, and the thing that I'll also say is it might not even necessarily be that necessary because when you think about how much a character by themselves can actually carry, it's no more than like 12 or so items at any given point in time. If you, and that's including as assuming that you have like the biggest backpack, which gives you 8 inventory spaces. You also have empty pockets, and you have two of your, say, equipped inventory slots. Like two of your weapon slots are empty, right? So that's assuming a lot. Where usually it'll probably be less than 8 inventory slots per each person. So you can't actually carry that much on an individual basis.
Yeah, so I think it came out and there's some stuff that'll I hope like State of Decay 3 fixes some of these like weird things that are like not the most optimized solution that they came
Yeah,
up with.
I don't think they're unaware of like the problems with the second game. I think they understand, and it might have just been a resource thing.
Yeah. So hey, Microsoft acquired State of Decay 2, and it looks like it was June 2018.
Yeah,
I think it's really cool. This is a really good Game Pass game. Um, it's on PC Game Pass as well. It was so easy for us to matchmake because the Microsoft friends list is shared between PC and console.
oh yeah,
I invited you to my party chat. We just loaded each other's game and went. It's like we were both playing on console. It's totally great. I'm really glad I grabbed a. There is a nice thing where like I have people who play PC stuff and I can join them on a console because of this, and I hope there's a lot of Game Pass games that like continue to do that. I'm sure Sea of Thieves is the same. I think I'm curious if Master Chief Collection is the same way.
yeah. It's like
I'll have to look into it.
Xbox games have been this for I think like a year or two with their Play Anywhere initiative. Like you can matchmake with most games. I think like most first party games.
So hey, as it turns out, Game Pass and Microsoft continuing to offer very good like options for playing and like not just buying $60 games where you're just subscribing to their service. And I think with Game Pass Ultimate having streaming coming to PC and Xbox where you're basically streaming they have almost said it's the equivalent of streaming a Series X game
Hmm.
to I think they said phones. It's not going to be the same as a Series X on a phone, but like I have an Xbox One S that I can give to someone, and they could play Series X games if they have good enough internet, which depends on where you live and how much money it is. But that's an option for people if they don't want to get into the new ecosystem because those are harder to find. But you can get an Xbox One S or a One X pretty easy, and they're usually a lot cheaper if you want to be in the subscription 15 a month. But I think that's a cool option. I think that's on PC as well in a certain degree. So that stuff's really cool.
Yeah, it's It's just a really good game because I've been going through a lot of podcasts recently, and it's a really good game to just have on hand for when I want to just vibe with something as I listen to like a Twin Peaks podcast or a actual play.
And to the next game, you have been playing some Call of Juarez Gunslinger. Was this on
Yeah, yeah,
sale
yeah.
or
So
something?
GOG had like a fall sale, I think, is what this one was. I did find. No, they had a first person shooter sale. Um, and on that sale was the game's Singularity and Call of Juarez Gunslinger, and I bought both of those. Uh, Singularity because its normal price is ridiculous, and getting it at sort of set for $7 is, a steal when you look at the fact that Activision does not like lower the price of their older games. Um, yeah, so I bought and started playing Call of Juarez Gunslinger. This is a game, like the setup for this game is it's 1910. A 101-year-old man walks into a bar, sits down, and starts telling his story about his life as a bounty hunter. Um, and it's pretty fucking rad.
It is very fucking right. I played this when it came out in 2013 because my friend and I were so heavily into. I think Red Dead 1 came out at around the same time.
Yeah,
I think Red Dead 1 was like 2010. I have to look up the date. But Gunslinger is 2013. But we were playing online. Yeah, it's 2010. But we were playing online for about a year or two. And this comes out, and he's one of my friends. My friend Andy is way into this. And I had seen coverage of Gunslinger. I think I ended up buying it as well and playing it. Yeah, it's a really cool first person shooter. I think, and the stylization of it is really cool. It's almost cell shaded.
yeah. It's like it has a storybook sort of real dime novel art, like cell shading that goes into it, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's kind of just because of the resources that everybody do it kind of, I don't want to say impressionist because I feel like that's a very intentional thing and I don't know what they were doing, but it is like out of the page of an adventure book in a real
Yeah,
way.
and playing it at the time, it gave me like the Borderlands 2 vibes, except
Yeah,
it's a western. And I think this game released at a cheaper price point because it is like a smaller game than the
yeah,
other two Call of Juarez games that Techland put out. I think it launched at like $20 or thirty
yeah. So
dollars.
this was another like Xbox 360 arcade game. And that would have been I think yeah, like 25 dollars when it came out. And
Yeah, I think it was
yeah,
$20. Oh yeah, they put it on Switch too at some point. This came
yeah.
out
It's
on
everywhere.
there, so
Like
that's cool.
yeah, it's
Oh, it's
everywhere.
15. It was 15. It was
Oh,
$15.
wow. That's
I
a
think it came to PC. I think it came to PS3 as well at some point. Yeah, it launched PC, Xbox Live, PSN for $15. And this game played like I remember. I have very fond memories of like the reload animations and the shooting animations of the all the guns you kind of have because it's so
yeah.
stylized.
Well, yeah, it's like, you said you're going through this game, you're going through like a number of first-person shooter levels. It's almost a shooting gallery game. You have like, I think, 6 or 7 guns in total, and like your upgrade path, because as you're killing people, you're getting XP because it's that sort of era of games. As you're like hitting your upgrade path, you're getting more like attributes to, like how you use your guns and how some animations play. And there comes like an upgrade that you get that is just mash X or the reload button to reload faster. And so it basically turns you into like if you've seen the Dark Tower movie or a clip from the Dark Tower movie where Idris Elba's character, the gunslinger, is reloading his gun, you look like that in a real way.
Yeah, I remember that skill very well. And hey, I think I have it how long to beat. It's about 5 hours, and if you're doing extras and completion, it's 7 to 13.
It's a
Aren't
real
you also
short.
like you're a bounty hunter, right?
Yeah.
You're
So,
hunting down each level's kind of you're hunting down like a new bounty target, if I
yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah, so like, this is, set up being the recollection of the exploits of one Silas Greaves, right? This legendary bounty hunter, who like is is fabled by all these, like, we just said dime novels. Like, you're one of the people you're telling your tale to, this kid named Dwight, is so into your like mythos that he knows of all the exploits that you've done, and most of this game is like, well, that's not how it really happened. And so the way that levels play out is this exaggerated detailing of your own like exploits, of the form of games, in that you are gunning down literally hundreds of people.
Yeah, almost like a Tiny Tina DLC where it's like this is not
Yeah. It's like,
real in a
this
way.
is not really what's happening. Like, Dwight will embellish based off of what he's read from the book that he has in his hand. And Silas would be like, I did not kill nearly that many people. I killed a lot of people, but it was not nearly that many. Um, and then eventually, as because every level is like a new bounty, you're sort of a new like bounty objective that may or may not end with a duel. Eventually, it gets to the point where Silas is exaggerating his story because he's getting increasingly drunk. Uh, to the point where his story, like, there's a point where he describes having a gun battle with Jesse James, arguably like the most famous outlaw of like the Western mythos, and the result of that gunfight, of that duel, is you wound him bad enough that he has to stop being a bandit, right? You don't kill him, but you deliver unto him wounds that means he can't like be a gunslinger anymore. He can't effectively fight. And that's what opens up the opportunity for Robert Ford to assassinate Jesse James, right? So this character is spreading out, like sort of embellishing his own influence as he becomes like increasingly drunk throughout the telling, and it becomes like a less sort of stable recollection of these events in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and I almost forget because I don't think I played a lot of stuff in the 360 era, but I remember it was Call of Juarez 1, which was like a 2009 360 game. And then the sequel, Bound in Blood, was a prequel. Both of those were in the West. And then they went off and did a Call of Juarez, The Cartel, which is like a modern day setting that deals with the cartel. And it probably takes place in El Paso, yeah. And all that kind of stuff. And I don't think people like the cartel a lot. And they're like, yeah, we want to go back to doing the Western stuff. So that's kind of how Gunslinger came about. And I think, yeah, they went off and did more with like Dead Island and Dying Light after this. Yeah. So 2011 was before Gunslinger and it was Dead Island, and then Dying Light in 2015. Or I have felt like in playing Dying Light, I was like, oh, this kind of has like, I can feel some of the like bones of like the older like Call of Juarez stuff in this as well. And I really like Techland's games. I should go back and play Gunslinger. It's a dope ass fucking game.
Yeah, like, it's like, I don't. I don't. I just did look at the docket of like things we have. It's like, oh, I just remember you're gonna talk about Red Dead 2 again, but like, I don't mean to like say this specifically because we have Red Dead 2 coming up here, but like, I would say like Gunslinger is like pretty easily probably the best Western game to come out of like the 2010s.
It's very good. I think even looking back, I'm looking at the Call of Juarez 1 and Bound in Blood gameplay. Those are also very interesting, like first person Western games where I don't think the shooting, like the shooting in Red Dead 2 is good to a certain degree, but it's not as favorable to like
Well, I
being
mean, it's just like Red
like this.
Dead.
The Gunslinger is like a fun game where when I aim at reticle, I'm usually hitting it, is what I remember. And they want you to be much more precise, and too with like the waiting for the reticle to come down or like using auto aim and stuff. Like I want to play Red Dead 2 with free aim, first person, and aiming down sights, but I never feel as accurate in those, as
Well,
like accurate in the sense that I want to be a fun gunslinger, not and just point at someone and shoot like a first person shooter.
I mean, it's mostly like Gunslinger is on its sleeve, right? It tells you that it is emulation. It is emulating Western stories, to the point that this is just a Western story where you are playing an OC who gets to have like shootouts with Jesse James and gets like the, air quote, like real sort of experience, ending of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, right? Um, like the narrative at work here is just an interesting.
My dog's barking. Yeah. Gunslinger's really cool. You're a bounty hunter.
Okay,
A
okay,
short
I'm back.
experience.
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah. So it's this take on a form that I don't think like Red Dead, either of those games, like does particularly well, because those games are mostly about being sandboxes where you can run around and like conquer a world, right? Where you go around and you tame and claim the air quote dying West. Um, and the narrative isn't actually really about what does like the dying West look like. And Gunslinger like kind of is, and that's why I like it a lot more than like either of like those highly produced big cowboy sandboxes that is like kind of the canon of like the Western game, right? The image that everyone gets.
Well, even the older two games, Bound in Blood and the first Call of Juarez, they're much more brief, linear experiences where you are getting a set story told to you as well as like, kind of these, what would you call them, like single player shootouts that are like specifically made for like a campaign instead of like your open world missions where you have your single player stuff and then you have the open world in between those missions, where this is much straightforward shot.
Yeah, no,
And
like
yeah,
the
I think they're two really
oh
different
yeah,
experiences that are both fun in like different ways.
yeah. The other thing is like the dueling system in this game, like in Gunslinger, is just really cool, right? Because the dueling system in here is like like once you get to the end of a chapter, you get like a named character, and then the camera pans down to like center your gun in its holster and your hand above it, and to your right, in like the sort of background of the image, you have your subject, and you're using the two. If you're playing on a controller anyway, you're using the two like thumbsticks to manage the positioning of your hand to your gun and the focus of your reticle on your opponent. And the way that you play around with that, and the way that the game plays around with that, as the chapters go on, is really interesting, to the point that it culminates in you using that mechanic to basically emulate the ending duel of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, so that also very it's a cool game. Hey, did you ever play Gun? Did you ever
I
hear
don't.
about
I've
Gun?
heard
It was like a
about
Western
Gun.
game.
I don't think I
It was
ever
like
played Gun though.
yeah, it was that PS2 Xbox generation, and there was like a 360 port, but it was a NeverSoft Western. That was a kind of around the same time as that first Red Dead, the one before Redemption 1. It's like Red
Yeah,
Dead
the
Revolver.
revolver. Yeah,
Yeah, and you would be doing your third person action stuff, and you could also just aim down sights for certain things, and it just never felt good on a PS2 game, but it was also a pretty interesting one of those like coming out from this time. Like you have Deadeye, where like in Red Dead, where it slows down time and you're kind of locking on to people and shooting them. And to get health back, you have like a bottle of whiskey
yeah,
on the side that you're taking drinks out of to bring your health back
yeah.
up.
Classic.
Classic, yeah. So I'm curious if you end up beating this, if you'll play like those first two Call of Juarez games, because they're both Western. It's much like
Eh,
Gunslinger, but they're more. It's about two brothers and a younger brother, and they both used to be in the Civil War, and they left. And it's what their story is coming to the West after the Civil War, and their brother's like I think he's a priest or something.
I doubt it. Like, like the attraction of Gunslinger is that is the way that it plays with the form of westerns, right? Like, like when we look at when we talk about how kind of poorly, how such a poor fit westerns are for video games as a medium, because like westerns as narratives aren't fundamentally about gunfights in the way that video games have kind of made them out to be. Um, like Gunslinger kind of gets that and like plays up that heightened aspect of Silas's recollection of his, of his bounties, and that's why there's so many people for you to kill. That's why you are literally killing hundreds of people, and like the people you're talking to, because you have that crowd listening to your story. Ben, Dwight, Jack, Steve, and Molly. Like Jack is the continuous skeptic who's like, I can't, like, I do not believe that you have killed hundreds of people, and Silas is just like, well, I mean, I'm telling you, that's what happened. Um, and the way that like Gunslinger plays around with that is so very unique to that individual game. Like, I don't think I'm gonna look at Bound of Blood and like look at its shooting gallery levels and gonna be like, yeah, I want more of this necessarily. I might when they're on sale again, but it's not a priority. I think I got what I want out of Gunslinger.
Yeah, and it's like such a what I would call best of Western kind of in a way where you're
Yeah.
hitting all these characters from Western movies and Western like mythos, and it's doing all of those things in such a brief time that I think works to its advantage very well.
Oh yeah. Like if this game was 8 or 10 hours long, I'd be much less hyped on it than I am. It's like less than 5, and I think that's a big reason as to why I think about it. I'm like, man, this is just, I'm gonna keep this on my hard drive. This game's cool.
Yeah, it's cool to pop back in and play it every now and then. I kept it on my PS3 hard drive for a while after I don't remember if I beat it, but I would definitely hop in and start a new game and do the openings and stuff. And I remember when that first came out that I hadn't really heard of the other Call of Juarez games besides reviews that would come out of like GameSpot and IGN.
Yeah.
And at a point I was like, "Oh, I really like this. I should go back and play them." But I think other games came out and didn't end up doing it, but I'm curious what my thoughts would be if I played all three of those games. I think Gunslinger shines the brightest of the three, but I think I watched some playthroughs of 1 and 2, and I really like the voice acting cast,
Yeah.
so that could be something
I mean, there's a reason like
for me personally.
Bound in Blood, like I don't want to say popularizes the series, but like Bound in Blood, like is a really big game for that moment that it came out in, right? Like it was very popular at the time. That was leading some of the big air quote discourse. Um, and they kind of ruined that with the cartel.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Now they're making Dying Light 2.
speaking of westerns,
Speaking of westerns, hey, before we started this podcast, I played like 2 or 3 hours of Red Dead. So here's my weekly Red Dead 2. Last time we checked in, Arthur and the gang had arrived to Saint Denis because we are looking for the person who had kidnapped Jack's son. Jack is the son.
Jack is the son.
John Marston's son, Jack.
Yep.
So we're trying to find them. So the last mission I did, it's like one of the first missions you do in Saint Denis is Arthur's coming up to a bar and someone taps him on the shoulder and he's like, "Put up your hands, outlaw." And it's actually Dutch just fucking around with you because they're kind of getting you into a little more of like you and Dutch having more conversations in like this beginning of Saint Denis. So we're talking about finding people around Saint Denis who know about the person who kidnapped Jack.
Yeah.
So I talked to the bartender and he's like, "I don't know who that person is. You shouldn't ask about them. Please leave." And then as I'm leaving, a patron comes up to me and is like, "Hey, the kids in this town know who this person is." So I go to this side like alley, and there's a couple kids in there, and they're like the local ruffians, what I would call like the gangs of children, the ne'er-do-wells who know the town very well, but also like to rob people.
Yeah.
And of course, you get robbed by this kid, but the first thing that happens is that there's 3 of them, and they're all you're in the middle, and they're all make a triangle around you as you're talking to the one in front of you. And he's like, "Hey, do you know where this guy is?" And he's like, "Yeah, for $5, I'll tell you." And then Arthur's like, "That's a lot of money. I could go to like New York for that much money." It's kind of making a joke about it.
Yeah.
So the kids kind of start showing me around the town a little bit, and then they rob me, and you get an extended chase sequence where you're chasing the kid. And at the very end of it, there's like 10 of these kids in this area, and 2 of them are holding shotguns up to me, and you're talking to them about how you paid one of them to get some information, but they ended up robbing you instead because you're trying to talk to the leader of the group.
Mm-hmm.
And he's almost framed as this like badass of these ne'er-do-wells, and he's just like writing you off as like a newcomer Yankee who shouldn't be asking about the kidnapper, who's like a very big part of this town, I'm guessing, because I haven't gotten further in it. But he tells you a building to go to, and then you go back to Dutch, and Dutch is like, it took you a while to get back here, Arthur. And Arthur's like, "Yeah, some kids robbed me. Don't ask about it." They kind of play that.
Yeah.
And then I think I talked to a missionary in the town who had lead me to a like point of interest to free some slaves that the town's underground is kind of like shifting around, because this is set in like 1899, I think, after the Civil War, and slavery has been abolished, so there is like an underground set of people who are still doing that. So I'm curious if that'll come up or if that was just a one-off thing. But Saint Denis cool. I went and got Arthur's haircut and bought some new clothes. You know,
Yeah.
open world stuff.
Good. Yeah. It's like the fun of Red Dead, going into a new store and making Arthur look pretty.
Yeah, the haircut I got was a parted backwards fade where it's like
Yeah.
pomade straight back, and then I got it really short on the sides, which I'm like, all right, cool.
Oh, yeah.
So
No,
and
dude,
then I'm gonna go buy some black shirts.
you can clean Arthur Morgan up real good. He looks slick, man.
Yeah, I
It's
want to give him a mustache
I
and some sick chops.
I spent entirely too much time like caring about Arthur's like look when I played through that game, when I really should have just been like, shave the beard, shave the hair down, and that's good enough. Like, part of me is like, Arthur Morgan would not spend this much time grooming himself, but also, dang, I like how this like comb over looks with this coat.
Yeah, but also I want to make people think when Arthur walks into the camp, be like, "Arthur, did you get a haircut? That looks really good." And I'm gonna be like, "Yeah, it does, motherfucker."
Yeah.
But it's cool. I think that's gonna be my continuing thing, where I'm just my slow burn of beating open world games, where I just kind of want to play a couple levels, like a couple chapters in a book or a TV show, and not like binge all of it once. Because that's what I used to do with like San Andreas. Is I would play San Andreas like, I think I played San Andreas over a year, just doing a couple missions, but mostly running around the open world and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is one way to play them. Let's see. Our last game on here is Boyfriend Dungeon.
Boyfriend Dungeon, which is also available on Game Pass, which is how I played it. So this is
Ooh.
a game by Kit Fox Games. So it was kickstarted pretty successfully. I remember seeing this around a lot of like PAX South convention floors during its development cycle. Is I think it's been at PAX South just about every year since that convention started. And it's a sort of, let's say, dungeon crawling. I don't want to say rogue. I think roguelite might be the thing to say there, because the dungeons are procedurally generated. Like, the layout changes as you leave and come in. And the narrative setup of this game is you are going to a city called Verona Beach for the summer, and you are picked up by your cousin who takes you to his old apartment, and you're going to stay there until the lease is up at the end of the summer. And while you're there, your cousin is going to do his darndest to make sure that you go on some dates, because you've never gone on a date with anyone before. And
Oh no.
what starts is just this story of finding love. But the thing is all the people you're dating can also turn into weapons. They are part people, part weapons. Like, the first one of these you meet is a Estic called Isaac, and he's like a lawyer, or like a legal representative. And you sort of, you meet him as you are about to go into one of the dungeons, and that sort of starts up, like, he kind of helps connect you with some other people. Your cousin helps you meet some other people, and just meet people because there are a lot of weapons in these dungeons because they're all being kidnapped for some reason, and you don't know why. Um, yeah, and you use them as weapons as you explore these dungeons that are manifestations of your own fears. There's two dungeons. One is like your fear of change. The second dungeon is your fear of intimacy. And as you like use these weapons, I believe there's seven or six. Uh, you like as you kill enemies and take them to like locations within the dungeons and give them gifts, you are ranking up their love or affinity, uh, to the point where your relationship is deepening, and you either form like a very good friendship or a very sort of passionate relationship, that is also like not gated. Like you do not have to choose which weapon you want to date. You can like form romantic relationships with each individual weapon if you do so please, and there's not like a penalty for doing so.
Okay, I'm watching some gameplay of this. I'm digging it. It's very reminding. It's reminiscent of the like dialogue scenes that were occurring in
Yeah. Well, it's like
what was the other one that people were like dating the hot dads one.
Dream Daddy.
Almost reminds me of Dream Daddy,
Yeah.
except you have like these dungeons you're going into and you're doing fights, and it's
Yeah.
like this almost isometric style fights, kind of like I'll use Hades as an example,
Yeah.
where you have your mini map and you're going from room to room, clearing out enemies and doing stuff.
Yeah. Like the part of it that is like the Dream Daddy visual novel is like I'd say 40% of the game, right? And those are all like specific sequences that are built around the dates you go on as you deepen your relationship with your weapons, and um, like other like narrative things, like your encounters with your cousin who invites you to like several parties throughout the summer, which is another opportunity for you to meet other weapons, and also the narrative beats that surround the character Eric, who is the first person you go on a date with, who like on that date is noticeably kind of overdoing it a little, and then as you continue to talk with him, or as the game continues, you realize he's a bit more than just a little overbearing. He is a stalker. And this is the sort of the narrative that the discourse of this game has kind of been stuck on, for a while, because people didn't like the content warning that shows up at the start of this game when it first released was like, this game contains mentions of stalking and harassment, whereas did not mention that it was a specific part of the narrative that the player kind of has to interact with. They then updated that content warning to better reflect the part this content plays in its main narrative. And I will say, like, I understand why people would want to interact with it, but like the fantasy, like this game is never not aware that Eric is a creep, right? This game always knows that what Eric is doing is wrong and is creepy and is a violation of your privacy and like agency in a very real way, and never frames him as anything other than like the antagonist.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Eric looks like a pretty boy.
Yeah, like
Just looking at these pictures of him,
yeah, like I mean, the
blonde
thing is
hair,
like everyone's like very
glasses.
pretty. Like it's like everyone in the game is very very pretty. Um, and Eric is among them, and it's just sort of this behavior that surfaces as you interact with Eric on like in the ways that you have to interact with Eric for the main narrative. Like you can mostly ignore Eric throughout the game, and it's pretty easy to do that. And like the other thing that I will say, like it like just sort of like capstone discussions around Eric is like the game, like the fantasy around having this narrative in the game is that like Eric kind of realizes by the end of it that he's a creep, and decides to start going to therapy. Like the
Good for him.
yeah, like it is fun to it.
Smart
Yeah,
decision.
it's the thing is just like he knows. Like by the time you get to the end of the game, like he knows he's a creep, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna work on this, and I'm just gonna leave. Like he leaves. He doesn't sort of ask for your forgiveness or anything. He's like, I'm gonna start going to therapy. I'm gonna go because I shouldn't be here. And it's the last we see of
Gotcha.
him. Like I would say in the way that the game handles that narrative, it's pretty responsible, considering like the really low bar that like video games have for handling complex, narratives
Yeah.
and subjects. And
Did you end up?
what's it?
Sounds like you ended up beating this
Yeah, I
too.
finished it. It's really short. I think I kind of ended up destroying the structure of the game a little in the way that I was playing it because I was not like forcing myself to go through every dungeon. Because the other thing about this game is it's relatively easy, or for me it was pretty easy. So I was getting really far into dungeons very quickly. So I was like going down one or two floors and then being like, okay, I need to leave the dungeon. So I'd either let my character get knocked out. And the thing is, when you get knocked down in a dungeon, you don't lose anything, whether it be XP or resources that you gather. You don't like lose anything at all. Or I would just leave the dungeon via the elevator that spawns on certain floors. And the thing is the in-game content unlocks when you get a weapon to like a six love rank, right? From like you have a scale from 1 to 6. Um, and once you get a weapon to the six love rank, the in-game content kind of unlocks, and you can choose to go fight, your final confrontation with Eric. The thing is, I hadn't finished the second dungeon by the time I got a weapon to level 6, and like I had this whole beat where it's like we gotta go see what's up with Eric now. We gotta solve this whole thing. I was like, but wait, the dungeon under the dance club. I gotta go stop that, and I have these other weapons I
Huh.
need to level up. Um, and it's just like because of how I like mess with the structure, like it was really strange because like that second dungeon is about your fear of intimacy. But because I had reached like max rank on a couple of weapons, I had already like formed like intimate relationships with like these people. And so it's just like the way that interacted with the where the narrative was and where my character was at the time was just was a little there's some dissonance there. It didn't necessarily work that well. So the thing that I will say is like if you end up playing this or anyone ends up playing this, like don't feel like you need to sort of gate how far you get into a dungeon as you're playing it. Like the in-game content will unlock as soon as you get anything to level 6, but you can hit that stuff at your own pace.
Well, I guess the bonds that you formed with other people helped you come go by your personal
Yeah,
uh, troubles, and it let you get to the end game.
yeah.
So you did it,
Got to the
Austin.
in-game surprisingly quickly. It's very short. They said they're gonna add more stuff to it. Like I think there's like two characters that were involved in that Kickstarter that I don't think are there that I'm pretty sure are gonna be added later. Like one of them is teased in a party at your cousin's where he says, "Oh, I'd love to go dungeon delving with you, but I have a business trip that's gonna take me out of Verona until the end of the summer." So I was like, "Oh, okay, bye." And he's like, "Bye," and we sent me a text later that was like, "I hope we see each other again soon." I'm like, "I'm sure we'll see each other sooner than we think."
Yeah.
So
Okay, so I
this will
have
be
some
added. What's up?
questions
What's up?
about the
What's up?
structure of this game. Okay, so do you pick a gender in the beginning,
Yeah.
or is it
So it's
very?
so you create a character. It's using he, him, she, her, they, them pronouns. It's all pretty custom. I will say like the detail of the character is not like defined enough to where I think they're gonna like depending choosing a certain gender does not make you like look any differently, right? It does not like change the structure of your avatar such as it is. Like it's a bit too simple for that. Like purposefully, I would say built simple enough to where it doesn't warrant that changing around much. And this is all like they're all saying like you, right? Like no one when they say your name, it's like the name that you input, um, and like it's being sort of told from the first person perspective. So like you are you, right? Like the camera is always your perspective of what you're seeing. It's in the way that visual novels are.
Okay, and this is specifically boyfriend dungeon. I'm guessing you're mostly dating like male characters
No,
because I
it's
saw you interacted with like a female characters. I think her name was Valerie or
yeah, no,
Valeria.
I mean it's like there are two. Okay, so I'm gonna think about this for a moment. So the characters, there are two male characters, like two characters who are identifies male. There is one character who identifies as a woman, and there are two non-binary characters. There's also a cat. You don't date the cat. The cat is a set of brass knuckles. Um, so
Haha.
you hang out and you become friends with the cat, and it's pretty cool. The cat's actually really good.
So a
Um,
little, almost a little social linky like Persona, where you don't have to specifically date these people, but
yeah,
you are like spending
yeah,
like time with them and getting to know them.
yeah. Like there's yeah, you don't have to like pretty quickly in your uh at the start of your relationship with these people. It asks whether or not if you're on board for this being romantic in nature. And you can very quickly say no. And at any time, if you decide that it is going to be romantic, at any time you can pull out of that, right? And you'll still be friends. Um, like it, like now I'm looking at like I'm double checking the fan wiki, but like yeah, it's like at any point in time you can still be friends with these people, or you can choose
That's
to
cool.
become like intimate with them, and it doesn't affect the game either way. Like there's a video, there's a YouTube video essay. It's not about Boyfriend Dungeon, but does mention it. I believe it's from the YouTube channel Melina Pendulum, if I remember correctly. And the section of her video that like talks about Boyfriend Dungeon also features the impressions uh, of someone of like an ace person, an asexual person playing the game, and like being satisfied with the fact that the game does not sort of push you into being romantic with any of your weapons unless you want to.
Okay, that's cool. I would really, and I think I'm excited to hear that because I want to get to know everybody in here, but I also want to create my anime wife like harem of women because I'm a terrible person. So I'm glad you can kind of get to know lots of different people and kind of interact with different people without like being in a committed relationship with anybody, or you kind of have choices on different stuff. And second question is, are the brass knuckle cats like, does it look like a cat? Do the brass knuckles look like a
The
cat?
brass knuckles do not look like a cat. The brass knuckles transform into a
Ah,
cat. I mean,
missed
they have
opportunity
they
there.
have like claws at the end of them, right? The brass knuckles have like these sort of indent points of like brass knuckles like between where you put your fingers. There are like spikes there, so you're technically clawing
Okay.
at people when you do some slashing moves, but that's about it. There's no like cat theming.
Okay, that's not too bad. Sounds like they've got some claws in there. That's cool. This sounds fun. Hey man, it's on Game Pass. I'll probably mess around with it a little bit. It seems like something you could play for an hour or two and be like, yeah, this is pretty cool. I like this.
Yeah,
Nice little experience. Like, when you're pulling something up on Netflix and you're just like, I want to experience this, but I'm probably not going to finish it all the way.
yeah. It's just real short, easy to hop into, and like it's pretty easy to get like a hint of whether or not you'll actually like where the game's going. Uh, and I guess it stands right now. It's like it's fine. It's a fun game. There's some things around like some of the relationships they enter into is like own like come around like one of the relationships you can enter into is like with this college kid named Sawyer, and they are kind of like they're kind of coded as being like okay, so there are three characters that identify as he can. But Sawyer is kind of coded as like being like a young, very young college student, and immediately was like, no,
Please don't flirt with me.
yeah,
I'm a young college
yeah.
student.
It's like
Don't
I
do
am
this.
not flirting with this young college student. Thank you very much. Like we will be friends. I will show them how to cook food, because they're absolutely hopeless in that regard. But like I am not flirting with this disaster child. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Uh,
Well, that sounds pretty cool.
yeah.
I'll give it a shot. All right, we're hitting the hour mark. So thanks for joining us. Overall, what's your final impressions on Boyfriend Dungeon? How was it for you?
I mean, depending on their next update, like I might check it out like as they start adding because there are two characters that are sort of listed as coming soon on the Boyfriend Dungeon fan wiki. So like once those characters get added in, I might revisit it. Who knows? But it was fun while I was there, even though I could definitely see the seams around where I had kind of destroyed the game structure.
Yeah, you did some speed ran this game is what it sounds like. Haha.
Yeah,
All
or
right.
like dragged it out to the point it didn't make sense anymore. Is what I'll say.
Yeah. Well, we it looks like we got game news coming up. It'll probably come if you're listening to this the day of. It'll be the day after. But there's a separate video for game news or a separate podcast for the audio listeners. So thanks for joining me, Austin.
Thank you for having me.
And see you next time, I guess. Later, viewers. Later, listeners.